Hello students, welcome to KENE'S Educare, a group of KENE solutions. This is part 4 of lesson number 6, tissues. Okay, so in this lesson particularly we are discussing all about the plant tissue and the animal tissue. Okay, so we will do a quick revision of what we have studied earlier, and now we are only left with three types of animal tissues, right? वन टाइप वी हैव ऑलरेडी डिस्कस्ड ऑन दैट इज द एपिथेलियल टिश्यू पे हमने डिस्कस किया हुआ है. नाउ द रेस्ट थ्री दैट वी आर लेफ्ट विथ इज द कनेक्टिव टिश्यू, muscular tissue and the nervous tissue. So these are the three different types of tissues which we are left with, and we are going to discuss with the exercise like the 14 questions or 15 questions which have been given at the end. We are going to discuss on that as well. Okay, so we are going to discuss quickly on the plant tissue that we have discussed. I hope you know that हमारा जो like tissues are of two type. We have plant tissue, and plant tissue में what we have discussed कि we have two different types of plant tissue, right? कितने? Two different types of plant tissue. Firstly we have meristematic tissue, now this meristematic tissue is again of three type. First type that we have is meristematic tissue का the first type is apical meristematic tissue. Okay, then the second type that we have apical के बाद we have intercalary tissue, and lastly we have lateral tissue, right? So देख intercalary tissue, intercalary meristematic tissue, and lastly we have lateral meristematic tissue. Okay, and second type of tissue that comes under plant tissue is the permanent tissue. Okay, now this permanent tissue is of two type. We have simple permanent tissue and secondly we have complex permanent tissue. Okay, so these are the two different types of permanent tissue that we have, and this is plant tissue. Now the next thing that we have is the animal tissue. Animal tissue we have already started, and we know that there are four different types of animal tissue that we are going to discuss in this lesson. First is the epithelial tissue. Now if you remember, epithelial tissue we have already discussed on, and we saw that we have columnar tissue. Okay, then we have squamous epithelial tissue, we have stratified squamous epithelial tissue, and there is one more type that is cuboidal, right? Cuboidal epithelial tissue. So these are the four different types of animal tissue that we have. Okay, so इसके बाद like epithelial tissue के बाद we have three more tissues to discuss on, that is connective tissue. Okay, After discussing on connective tissue, we are going to discuss on the muscular tissue, and last tissue that we have is the nervous tissue. Okay, so these are the four different types of animal tissue that we are going to discuss on. So epithelial, so we have already done with, right? We have completed that. So I will just show you the screen like till this simple permanent tissue, because वो हमने पहले भी पढ़ा है, so we have done the revision. So complex permanent tissue we will discuss once, and the epithelial tissue we are going to discuss once, because we have done that in the last class itself, right? So हम वो discuss करेंगे, but this meristematic tissue and the permanent tissue, I'm going to show you the screen for few seconds. You just grasp all the important points that you can find it on the screen, okay, so that you have a revision of that as well. Okay, and I hope that you all are practicing the diagram which has been given. So now you know what exactly the tissue is made up of, how it is made, what are the different types and all, right? And the examples, yeah, like you remembering the example is also very important, okay? Go through all the difference that you can see between the plant tissue and the animal tissue, okay, because it has already been discussed. So up when I'm showing you the screen and when I'm asking you the question on are the plants and animals, they are made up of same types of tissue, so iska answer should be very much clear into your mind, okay? So now there are certain questions which you can go through on the screen, right? Screen पे कुछ questions है which you have to go through, and since we have already discussed, you should know the result. Whenever you see this diagram of the growth in the roots of the onion bulb, it should quickly remind you of the conclusion that we can come up with and what the experiment or the activity is all about. Okay. Now here you need to go through the section of the stem very much thoroughly, because later we have discussed on xylem, phloem and all. So that time the same discussion we had went through, like अगर हम stem का session लेंगे, there we when we observe that, like by adding the saffron in solution and a drop of glycerine, when you observe that under a microscope, you can see the xylem, phloem and all, which comes under the session of the stem itself. Okay. And here you can see that, like when we discussed on the simple permanent tissue, we have three different kinds of simple permanent tissue. It includes parenchyma, it includes collenchyma, and it includes sclerenchyma. So these are the three important types of simple permanent tissue that we have. And all the tissue, like the parenchyma ke under the whatever kind of cells that we have, like parenchyma is one of the most common type of simple permanent tissue, which have all the living cells inside it, as well as these cells inside the parenchyma, they are usually loosely arranged, and you will see that there are large spaces which are present between them, and we can see that inside the tissue that there are many intracellular spaces which has been present. And this tissue, it generally stores the food. What does it store? It stores food inside it. So parenchyma ka one of the, you can say, one of the feature or one of the function is storing the food inside the tissue. Okay. And where can we find the simple permanent tissue? Now you have the epidermis, and epidermis ke there are few layers which are beneath the epidermis. That few layers are called as parenchyma. Okay. नेक्स्ट थिंग दैट वी हैव इज कॉलेनकाइमा. ना कॉलेनकाइमा जो है, वी हैव लाइक अगर पैरेनकाइमा के पास क्लोरोफिल प्रेजेंट है, then we call it as chlorenchyma. And if it has large air cavities which are present, if I talk about the aquatic plants के पास अगर large air cavities present है, then we call that parenchyma, because that is helping the parenchyma in floating, right? So such a kind of parenchyma we call it as erenchyma. So we get two types of chymas here. Chlorenchyma, if it contains chlorophyll, and if it is having large air cavities, then we call it as erenchyma. Okay. And whatever kind of flexibility that we see in the plant, that is because of another kind of permanent tissue. Apart from parenchyma, we have collenchyma, which is helping in maintaining the flexibilities in the plant. Okay. So you might have seen like the plants have tendrils, and there are stems of climbers which are present within the plants. Okay. And that doesn't allow any breaking as well. So that bending of the plant is due to the collenchyma itself, because collenchyma, it provides a mechanical support to the plant. Okay, so collenchyma, if you see, there are little, very little intracellular spaces which are present within the cell, because the cells of the tissues, they are always living, they are elongated, and they are irregularly thickened at the corners. When you see the corners, there you will see that the cells of this tissue, they are irregularly thicked at the corner. And other than collenchyma, we have this sclerenchyma. Now you might you know that the plants, they are hard and stiff, right? So the reason for the plant being hard and stiff is because of this sclerenchymatous tissue which has been present, and all the cells of the tissues are dead. Now you can take an example of the husk of the coconut. The husk of the coconut is hard because of this sclerenchymatous tissue which have been present, and these cells, these dead cells, they are going to be long and narrow because unka jo wall hai, that is thick. And why there is a thickness of that wall? Because of the lignin which has been present. Okay, so these are thick because there is no internal space which is present inside the cell, and these tissues they are present in the stem, around the vascular bundle, then in the veins of the leaves, as well as in the hard covering of the seeds and the nuts. So this all things are going to provide the strength to the plant part. Okay, so I want you all to go through this because this is important, because in this lesson we don't have much thing to know, right? So whatever they have been said, it should be like you know everything out of this lesson. What is chlorenchyma, what is arenchyma, what is parenchyma, what is the function of the collenchyma, why, what is this sclerenchymatous tissue they are helping the cell, in what way are they helping, and what kind of intracellular space they are having, what is the function that they are performing. Okay, so you should know each and everything that exists here when we are discussing on this simple permanent tissue. Now not only this, you should know the diagram as well of all the three types of simple permanent tissue which exist. Okay. So this first diagram, like this is the diagram of sclerenchyma when you observe it under the microscope. The first is the transverse section, and the second wala structure that you can see, that is the longitudinal section of the sclerenchymatous tissue. Okay, so I hope that you have drawn the diagram for each, and you are aware of all the three different types of you can say simple permanent tissues which are present. Okay. Then we have this third activity which was given. I want you all to go through this. Now in this like in this slide, when you go through, you will come to know what are guard cells, what is the function that the guard cell perform, what is stoma, what is epidermis, what are the epidermal cells and the guard cells. Everything you'll come to know out of it. Okay, so please go through this. And one more thing, you need to practice the diagram given. Now in every part I tell you that practicing the diagram is important. देखो, You have to put 50% on the theory part and 50% because in biology drawing the diagram along with the theory is very important. Okay, now this is the coxel. Now there is one question that has been asked like in those 15th question. So there it has been asked you how the coxels how they are helping us in some or the other way, right? So here we have discussed about two things, एक तो suberin है and एक cutin है. Cutin is a chemical substance which is having a waterproof quality, right? So that is mostly present in the plant cell. So and that is mostly present in the desert plant, this cutin. And another thing that we have is you can say what do we call it as suberin. Okay, so please go through the functions of this cutin and suberin and what exactly cox cells are helping us and how is the epidermis and all functioning. Okay. Then last class में we have discussed on the complex permanent tissue where we saw that अभी तक हमने discuss किया था when we were discussing on simple permanent tissue. All the cells they were made like the tissue was made up of only one kind of cell or one type of cell, and all the cells they used to look like each other, and such tissues we call it as simple permanent tissue. Okay, then we have another type of permanent tissue which we called as complex tissue. Now it is called as complex tissue because complex tissue is made up of more than one type of cell. Okay, तो एक से ज़्यादा सेल से जो टिश्यू बनता है डिफरेंट डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ सेल्स है दैट काइंड ऑफ टिश्यू वी कॉल इट एज कॉम्प्लेक्स टिश्यू. ओके, सो ऑल दिस सेल्स दे कोऑर्डिनेट टू परफॉर्म अ कॉमन फंक्शन. अब सारे सेल्स एक दूसरे के साथ कोऑर्डिनेट करेंगे so that they can perform a common function, and xylem and phloem are the example of this complex tissue because xylem has different components like it has tracheids, it has xylem vessel, it has xylem parenchyma, xylem fiber. So this is how like these are the different things that xylem have. Okay, so xylem and phloem they are an example of complex tissue, and both are conducting tissues. Xylem and phloem दोनों भी क्या है? They are conducting tissue and they constitute a vascular bundle. ओके, तो वेस्कुलर टिश्यू जो है इट हैज़ मेड पॉसिबल इन द सर्वाइवल इन द टेरेस्ट्रियल एनवायरनमेंट. तो टेरेस्ट्रियल एनवायरनमेंट में उनको उनका सर्वाइवल किसने पॉसिबल किया है? इट इज़ मेड पॉसिबल बिकॉज ऑफ दिस वेस्कुलर टिश्यू. ओके, देन फ्लोएम में वी हैव सीव ट्यूब, वी हैव सीव प्लेट, फ्लोएम पैरेन्काइमा, and phloem parenchyma के साथ we have companion cells which have been present. So these are the different types of complex tissue that we have in phloem. So xylem and phloem में we have these different kinds of tissues which are present. Okay. Go through the diagram for this xylem and phloem, both of the thing. Okay, now see, as I told you that this xylem, it consists of this tracheids, then we have xylem parenchyma, we have xylem fibers which are present. Okay, so tracheids and vessels जो है, they both have thick walls, and there are many dead cells as well, which are present when they mature. So tracheids and vessels, both of them, they have tubular structures which are going to allow them so that they can transport the water and minerals active vertically, because xylems जो है, they are responsible for conducting water, and phloems जो है, that is responsible for conducting the food. And as I told you that xylem consists of tracheids, just a moment, xylem consists of tracheids and all. Tracheids, it has vessels, xylem parenchyma and xylem fibers. Okay, so parenchyma जो है, उसका function has to store food. So xylem fibers, they are mainly supportive in function. Okay, and phloem जो है, that is made up of 5 types of cells. Sieve cells, we have sieve tubes, we have companion cells, phloem fibers, and phloem parenchyma. These are the 5 different types of phloem that we have. So the sieve tubes that we have, they are tubular cells. क्या है ये? Tubular cells who are going to have perforated wall. Okay, so phloem is going to transport the food from leaves to other parts of the plant, and except that we have this phloem fiber. All the other phloem cells are living cells. तो सारे phloem cells जो है, they are going to be living cells only, except this phloem fibers. Okay, then we discussed on the animal tissue, where we like, did we discussed on this? I guess we directly started with the epithelial tissue, right? See, when we breathe, we can actually feel the movement of our chest, right? जब हम breathe करते हैं तो हमें अपने chest का movement feel होता है, right? Okay, when we are breathing, we can feel the movement that occurs in our chest, है ना? So how does this body parts, they move? What do you think? How do they move? For this, we have a specialized cell which has been present, and we call that as muscle cell. What do we call them? Muscle cells. So the contraction and relaxation of this cell, that results in the movement. Contraction and relaxation क्या करता है? वो हमें help करता है in this movement. Okay, so during breathing, what happens? We inhale the oxygen. Okay, so when we are inhaling this oxygen, where does this oxygen go? That oxygen is being absorbed in the lung, and then we transport it to all the body cells through the blood. ठीक है, क्या होता है? Suppose now we are inhaling the oxygen right now also, right? पूरा 24 hours we are inhaling the oxygen. So now this oxygen, it will be absorbed in the lungs, and once our lung is absorbing this oxygen, it is going to transport this oxygen to all the body cells. And ये क्या करेंगे? The oxygen is going to get transported to all the body cells through the blood. So now why would our cell needs oxygen? Do you know this reason? हमारे cells को oxygen की ज़रूरत क्यों होती है? Now we have discussed about the function of mitochondria, right? And there it provides a clue to this question. Why our cells need oxygen? Okay, so but blood flow and carrier. Okay, what? Blood flows and carriers, not carriers. Blood flows and it carries various substance from one part of the body to other. तो जब blood flow करेगा, what happens? Blood is going to flow and it is going to carry this various substances from one part of the body to the other part. For example, it carries oxygen and food to all cells. What happens? Now this blood is going to carry the oxygen as well as food to all the cells, and it is also going to collect the waste from all parts of the body, and it is going to carry them to the liver and kidney for disposal. What happens? The blood flow is going to carry the oxygen and the food to all the cells, and along with this oxygen and food, it is also going to collect the waste. Now from where the waste has been collected? From all the parts of the body, and from collect by like after collecting it from all the parts of the body, it is going to carry them to the liver and the kidney so that the disposal can occur there. Okay, so blood and muscles, they both are examples of tissues which are found in our body. Okay, what are the examples? Blood and muscle, they both are examples of the tissues which are found in our body, and on the basis of function that they are performing, we can think of different types of animal tissues. ठीक है? So whatever kind of function that they are performing, इसके basis पे हम बता सकते हैं that we have different types of tissue, animal tissue, जैसे कि we have epithelial tissue, we have connective tissue, we have muscular tissue, and we have nervous tissue. These are the four different types of animal tissues that we are having, and blood is a type of connective tissue and muscle forms the muscular tissue. ठीक है? ब्लड क्या कर रहा है? ब्लड इज अ टाइप ऑफ कनेक्टिव टिश्यू, एंड मसल जो है दैट फॉर्म्स द मस्कुलर टिश्यू. So epithelial tissue we have already discussed, where we have seen that the covering or protective tissue in the animal body, तो animal body के अंदर जो covering या protective tissue present होता है, we call that as an epithelial tissue. Okay, and this epithelium, it covers the most of the organ and cavities within our body. Okay, epithelium क्या करता है? It covers most organs and cavities within the body, where it also forms a barrier so that it can keep different body systems separate. Why this carrier a barrier has been formed? ताकि जो अलग अलग body में body systems that we are having, that should be separate. Okay, so the skin, the lining of the mouth, the lining of the blood vessel, lung alveoli, and kidney tubule, they are all made up of epithelial tissue. And this epithelial tissue, the cells are tightly packed and they form a continuous sheet. What do they form? They form a continuous sheet. So here they have only a small amount of cementing material which is present between them, and you will see that there is no intracellular spaces which exist there. Okay, so obviously if anything is entering or leaving the body, it should have, like, it should cross at least one layer of epithelium, right? So as a result, what happens? The permeability of the cell of this various epithelia, okay, so we have discussed on this epithelial tissue, where we have seen that जो हमारे outer covering होती है animal body में, that is called as the epithelial tissue, which is covering most of our organ as well as the cavities within our body, right? So abhi I have told you all, like I have clearly explained you all this now itself, but I am repeating it so that, because epithelial tissue is one of the important tissue which can be asked to you all like separately as well. Okay, so you should know that. Then आपको पता होना चाहिए कि वहाँ पे एक small amount of cementing material present होता है between the different types of epithelial tissue, but there is no intracellular space which is present. Okay, so anything which is entering the body or it is leaving the body, it must cross at least one layer of epithelium together. Okay, so because of this thing, what happens? The permeability of the cell, like of this various epithelia, they're going to play a very important role in regulating the exchange of material that is taking place between the body as well as between the external environment and the different parts of the body. Okay, so regardless of all these types, all the epithelium is usually, like you will see that all the epithelium, they are separated from their underlying tissue because of an extracellular fibrous basement membrane which is present there. क्यों सेपरेट होगा ये? बिकॉज ऑफ द एक्स्ट्रा सेलुलर फाइबरस बेसमेंट मेम्ब्रेन, एंड डिफरेंट एपिथेलिया, which are having these different structures, they correlate with their unique functions altogether. Okay, so for example, we have the cell linings, blood vessels, or lung alveoli. Okay, so your different epithelia, they have different structures, and those structures, they correlate with the unique features. Okay, for for example, the cell which is lining the blood vessels or the lung alveoli, where you can see that the transportation of the substances, they occur through a selectively permeable surface, then we have that a simple flat kind of skin which appears here, and that we call it as in simple squamous epithelium cells, which are extremely thin, and they have a, like, thin and flat. The squamous epithelial cell is going to be thin and flat, and they form a delicate lining there. Okay, then we have this esophagus and the lining of the mouth, which is also covered with a squamous epithelium there, and the skin that we have, that protects the body, and that is also made up of squamous epithelium only. So here the skin epithelial cells, there they are arranged in many layers. Now why? What is the reason behind arranging them in many layers? So that it can prevent the wear as well as tear. Wear and tear that appears on the skin, that can be prevented. Okay, and since they are arranged in the pattern of layers, the epithelium is called as stratified squamous epithelium. What do we call that? Stratified squamous epithelium. So when there is an absorption and secretion which occurs in the inner lining of the intestine, there are some tall epithelial cells which are present there, and this columnar epithelium, that facilitates the movement which takes place across the epithelial barrier. Okay, and in the respiratory tract, the columnar epithelial tissue, they have some cilia which is present. So cilia is an hair-like projection that appears on the outer surface of the epithelial cell. Cilia क्या है? Hair-like projection जो epithelial surface के outer surface पे present होती है, and this cilia, they can move, and once they are moving, वो जो movement है, that is going to push the mucus forward so that it can get cleared, and this type of epithelium we call it as ciliated columnar epithelium. क्या बोलते हैं हम इसे? Ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, so cuboidal epithelium, since it is cube shaped, they form the lining of the kidney tubule as well as the duct of the salivary gland, where it is going to provide the mechanical support. Okay, so the epithelial cells, often they require some additional specialization as the gland cells, so that they can secrete certain substances at the epithelial surface there. Okay, so sometimes there is a portion of the epithelial tissue which gets folded inward, and there is a multicellular gland which is formed at that position, and we call that as glandular epithelium. क्या बोलेंगे हम उसे? Glandular epithelium. Now the next type of tissue that we have is called as the connective tissue. क्या है next type? Connective tissue. Now blood is a type of connective tissue, and why do we call this as a connective tissue? So a clue is provided in the introduction of this chapter only. Okay, आपने जब मैंने ये लेसन स्टार्ट किया, देयर ओनली अ क्लू इज बिन प्रोवाइडेड व्हाई दिस इज ब्लड इज कॉल्ड एज अ कनेक्टिव टिश्यू. सो नाउ let us look at this type of tissue in some more detail. Now the cells, as I have told you that the cells are loosely spaced or they are loosely arranged, right? So the cells of connective tissue, they are loosely spaced and they are embedded in an intracellular matrix. कहाँ पे embedded होंगे ये? एक इंट्रासेल्युलर मैट्रिक्स के अंदर एम्बेडेड होंगे. सो दिस मैट्रिक्स, इट मे बी जेली लाइक फ्लूइड, डेंस और रिजिड. कैसे होगा ये इंट्रासेल्युलर मैट्रिक्स? इट इज गोइंग टू बी जेली लाइक, fluid, dense or rigid, and the nature of the matrix, it is going to differ. Now how this nature of the matrix differ? It differs with the function of the particular connective tissue that it has. ठीक है? So as I told you that blood is a type of connective tissue, it is going to have a fluid, and this fluid is going to be a liquid matrix which we call it as plasma. ठीक है? Blood को क्या बोलते हैं हम? Fluid matrix called plasma, in which red blood corpuscles, that is RBC, white blood corpuscles, that is WBC, and platelets, all these three are suspended in the blood. What do the blood has? Red blood corpuscles, white blood corpuscles, and platelets. All these three things are suspended into the blood. Okay, and as I told you that blood के पास एक fluid matrix होता है which we call it as plasma. Okay, so the plasma here, it contains proteins, salts and hormones. Plasma के पास क्या होता है? Proteins, salts and hormones. Okay, so blood flow and the transport gases as well as the digested food, hormones, waste material to different parts of the body. Okay, blood के पास क्या है? It is having this, the plasma, not blood. Plasma has protein, salt and hormones, and the blood flow and the transport gases which are present, they digest the food, hormones and waste material to different parts of the body. Now after this blood, bone is another example of a connective tissue. Bone क्या है? Bone is another example of connective tissue because bone forms the framework. Bone क्या form करता है? It forms the framework that supports the body, and not only it is forming the framework, it also anchors the muscle and it supports the main organ of the body. So bone is not only supporting, it is not only anchoring our muscle, but it is also supporting the main organ of our body. So bone is a strong and a non-flexible tissue. Now what will be the advantages of this properties for the bone function is this only, that bone, it anchors our muscles as well as it is supporting the main organs of our body. Okay, because it is strong and non-flexible. Now the bone cells, they are embedded in a hard matrix that is composed of calcium and phosphorus compound. Bone cells क्या है? Bone cells, they are embedded in a hard matrix, and that hard matrix, it is composed of calcium and phosphorus compound. किससे बनता है ये bone का hard matrix? Calcium and phosphorus compound. So two bones, they can be connected to each other by another type of connective tissue. दो bones कैसे connected है एक दूसरे से? Another type of connective tissue से, and we call that another type of connective tissue as the ligament. क्या बोलेंगे हम इसे? Ligament बोलेंगे. Okay, so this connective tissue is very elastic and it can be considerable strength, it can has that considerable strength as well within it. Now ligaments, it contains very little matrix. Ligaments का जो matrix होता है, that is very much small, and this ligament, it connects the bone with the bones itself. So ligaments and tendons, these are the two parts of the bones that we have. I told you that ligaments has very little matrix and it is going to connect the bone with the bone. But the tendons are going to connect the muscle to the bone, and these are the another type of connective tissue that we have. Tendons क्या करते हैं? वो muscle को connect करते हैं bone के साथ, and this tendons, they are the another type of connective tissue that we are having. So this tendons, they are fibrous tissue which is having a great strength but limited flexibility. Tendons के पास क्या है? They are having great strength but limited flexibility. Okay, so another type of connective tissue which we call it as cartilage. ठीक है, ये भी एक cartilage is also connective tissue. First type of connective tissue that we discussed was blood. Second kind of connective tissue that we had was bone. Now apart from this blood and the bone, we have the another type of connective tissue जिसको हम बोलते हैं cartilage. Okay, so cartilage has widely spaced cell, and the solid matrix of this cartilage, it is made up of proteins and sugar. Cartilage का solid matrix किससे बनता है? Proteins and sugar से बनेगा. So cartilage is going to smoothen the bone surface at joints, and this cartilage, it is also present in our nose, ear, trachea and the larynx. तो cartilage किससे बना है? First of all, it is made up of proteins and sugar. And what does the cartilage does? It smoothens the bone surface. Now at what place? At the joints. As well as this cartilages, they are also present in the nose, ear, trachea and the larynx. Okay, so when you fold the cartilage of ear, we cannot bend the bones in our arms. Now we can fold the cartilage which is present in our ear, पर हमारे arms के अंदर जो cartilage है ना, we cannot bend that. Okay, so think of two tissues now which are different. दो tissues है हमारे पास, but both the tissues, they are different. So here we have this areolar connective tissue which is found between the skin and the muscle, as well as around the blood vessels and the nerves in the bone marrow. ठीक है, so यहाँ पे कौन सा टाइप का टिश्यू है हमारे पास? एरियोलार कनेक्टिव टिश्यू. Now this areolar connective tissue, where can we find this? Between the skin and the muscle. तो skins and muscles के बीच में, this is a kind of connective tissue called as areolar connective tissue which has been present. Along with this, it is also present around the blood vessels and the nerves in the bone marrow. कहाँ पे present होगा? Around the blood vessels and the nerves in the bone marrow. Now it fills the space inside the organs, it supports the internal organ and it helps in repair of the tissue. तो ये क्या करता है, it is going to feel whatever space is present inside the organ, it is going to feel that space and it is going to support the internal organs which are present by helping them in repairing the tissue. Okay, so where are the fats stored in our body? Do you know हमारे body में fat कहाँ पे store होता है? So we have a fat storing adipose tissue. What do we have? We have fat storing adipose tissue which is found just below the skin and between the internal organ. कहाँ पे मिलता है हमें ये fat storing adipose tissue? It is found below the skin and between the internal organ. Where it is found? Below the skin and internal organs के बीच में the fat gets deposited there as a fat storing adipose tissue is present there. So the cells of this tissue, they are filled with fat globule. तो ये जो tissue है, ये जो सेल्स है इस टिश्यू का, एडिपोज टिश्यू का जो सेल्स है वो किससे फिल्ड होता है? दैट इज फिल्ड विद द फैट ग्लोब्यूल. ओके, सो स्टोरेज ऑफ फैट इट ऑल्सो लेट्स इट एक्ट एज एन इंसुलेटर. तो ये जो फैट का स्टोरेज हो रहा है दैट ऑल्सो एक्ट एज एन इंसुलेटर देयर. ओके, now see this is an activity. You need to take a drop of blood on a slide and you have to observe the different types of cells which are presented under the microscope. When you see that blood, what are the different kinds of cells which you can find? So you can find red blood corpuscles, white blood corpuscles and platelets, because that is the normal constituent of the blood that we have. Okay, now after connective tissue, now I hope that you are clear with the connective tissue. We have three examples which we have discussed. First was the blood is a connective tissue. Then we have bone, and after bone we have discussed about this, that is the cartilage which is present in our nose, ears and all. So ear ka cartilage we can bend it, but the cartilages which are present in our arms and all we cannot bend that. Okay, then the third type of tissue that we had is muscular tissue. Now this muscular tissue, it consists of elongated cells and we also call this tissue as muscular fiber. ठीक है, मस्कुलर टिश्यू किससे बनता है? elongated cell से, and we also call this elongated cell as muscle fibers. Okay, now the tissue which is here present in this muscular tissue is responsible for the movement of our body. Now if you remember, at the start only I have told you that how are we able to move our muscles? That is because of the contraction and relaxation that happens, right? So the muscular tissue is only responsible for showing the movement in our body, because our muscles, it contains special protein. Muscles के पास क्या होता है? Special protein होता है which we call it as contractile protein. ठीक है, muscles के पास कौन सा प्रोटीन है? Contractile protein. अब ये contractile protein क्या करता है? It contracts and relax, and because this contractile protein, and what happens, हमारा मसल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करेगा एंड रिलैक्स करेगा, विद बिकॉज ऑफ विच मूवमेंट इज पॉसिबल ऑफ आर मसल. ओके, सो वी कैन मूव सम मसल्स बाय कॉन्शियस विल एज वेल. हमारी मर्जी से भी तो हम अपने मसल्स को मूव करते हैं ना बहुत बार. व्हाई डज दैट हैपन? बिकॉज ऑफ द कॉन्ट्रैक्शन एंड रिलैक्सेशन ओनली. ओके, so the muscles which are present in our limbs, they move when we want them to and they stop when we so decide that, right? अभी आपका जो lymph muscle है वो कब move करेगा? When you want to move that muscle, it is going to move, but when you have to stop that, it is going to stop as well, right? So the muscle which is present in our limb, that moves when it wants to and we can stop that when we want. So such muscles we call it as voluntary muscle. ऐसे muscles को हम क्या बोलेंगे? We call them as voluntary muscle. So we have here the types of muscle fibers. So first is the striated muscles. Can you see the striations which can be seen on that muscle part? So first is the striated muscle. Second one is the smooth muscle, where we have this spindle shaped muscle cells which are present. And thirdly we have this cardiac muscle which is present. So these are the three different types of muscles which are present, and these are the voluntary muscles. Okay, it means voluntary muscle means they move according to our wish and they stop according to our wish only. Okay, so these muscles, they are also called as skeletal muscle, as they mostly attach to the bone and they help in the body movement. तो ये voluntary muscle को हम और क्या बोलते हैं? We also call it as skeletal muscle. Okay, now why we call them as skeletal muscle? Because they are mostly attached to the bone and they help us in the body movement. So under the microscope when you see this muscle, you will see that there are certain alternative light and dark bands or striations. Can you see the striations here? So light and dark bands दिख रहे हैं आपको ये muscles पे? So when you observe this under the microscope, you will see that there are certain alternate light and dark bands or striations which can be seen when we stain it appropriately. Okay, and we also call the striations as striated muscles. Okay, तो अभी ये जो मसल के सेल्स है, the cells of this muscular tissue, they are long, cylindrical, unbranched and multinucleated. Now what do you mean by multinucleated? It means it has many nuclei within them. Now if you can see the first structure, that is the striated muscle, it has many nuclei which is present on it, right? So the cells of this muscular tissue, they are long, they are cylindrical, they are unbranched and they are multinucleated. Okay, so the movement of the food in the alimentary canal or the contraction and relaxation of the blood vessels. तो जब आप blood vessels का contraction और relaxation देखोगे, and when there is a movement which you see which takes place in the alimentary canal, they are all involuntary movement that is not happening because of your will. जैसे when you are breathing you cannot stop the breathing process, right? If even if you are stopping it, वो फिर सिर्फ few seconds के लिए you can stop it, but later it is going to move on because it is an involuntary movement that your body is doing. So same way, this is the movement of the food that takes place in the in the alimentary canal. That is an involuntary movement. Okay, contraction and relaxation of the blood vessel is an involuntary movement that we have, right? So we cannot really start them or stop them simply by wanting to do so. हम इसको स्टार्ट भी नहीं कर सकते. एलिमेंट्री मूवमेंट का एलिमेंट्री कैनाल का जो मूवमेंट ऑफ फूड है, वी कैन नॉट इवन स्टार्ट इट, वी कैन नॉट इवन स्टॉप दैट. सो दैट इज वाई वी कॉल दिस टाइप ऑफ मसल्स एज और दिस टाइप ऑफ मूवमेंट्स एज इनवॉलेंट्री मूवमेंट. ओके, so we can see in the diagram we have smooth muscles. Okay, the first one is the striated muscle, second one is the smooth muscle, and the third one is the cardiac muscle. So these are the three different types of muscles that we are having which controls our movement. तो हमने यहाँ पे voluntary muscle, voluntary movement and voluntary muscles देखा, and we had involuntary muscles and involuntary movements which we have. Okay, so they are also found in the, now this muscular tissue, they are also found in the iris of the eye, in the ureter and in the bronchi of the lungs. So we can find this muscular tissue, it is present in our iris of our eye, in the ureter as well as हमारे lungs के bronchi के अंदर this muscular tissues are present. So the cells are long with pointed ends, that is spindle shaped ends, and they are uninucleated. It means they are having a single nucleus. So the cells which are present in the muscular tissue, वो कैसे हैं? They are longs and they will be long, and they are going to have a pointed end which we call it as spindle shaped ends, and they are uninucleated. It means they have a single nuclei. Okay, and we also call this as unstriated muscle. What do we call it as? Unstriated muscles बोलते हैं. But why do we call them as unstriated muscles? See, the muscle of the heart, they show rhythmic contraction and relaxation throughout the life. अब हमें पता है हमारा जो हार्ट मसल है वहाँ पे कंटिन्यूसली रिदमिक कंट्रैक्शन एंड रिलैक्सेशन हो रहा है, राइट? पंपिंग हो रही है हमारे हार्ट में. सो this muscles of the heart, they are continuously showing this rhythmic contraction and relaxation throughout our life, and this involuntary muscles we call them as cardiac muscle. क्या बोलते हैं हम इसे? Cardiac muscle, which you can see it here in this third diagram. This is the cardiac muscle का diagram. When you look it under a microscope, it looks like this. Okay, so heart muscle cells, they are cylindrical, they are branched and they are uninucleated. Heart muscles कैसे होते हैं? Cylindrical, branched and uninucleated. Okay, so now this is an activity which I want you all to do. You need to compare the structure of different types of muscular tissues which have been given. After comparing the structure, you have to note down their shape, the number of nuclei which is present, the position of the nuclei which is present within the cell. तो आपको shape लिखना है, number of nuclei which is present, position within the cell which is present. You have to write that, and this is your table. You need to find it out and you have to write it. Okay. After that, You need to write it with respect to three different muscular tissues, that is striated muscle, then we have the smooth muscle, and lastly we have this cardiac muscle. These are the three different types of muscular tissues which you need to find it out and you have to write it out. Okay. Now the last type of animal tissue that we have is called as the nervous tissue. कौन सा last type of tissue? It is the nervous tissue that we have. Okay. So all cell, they possess the ability to respond to stimuli. अब जितने भी cells हमारे body में हैं, they have this ability that they are going to respond to a certain stimuli which has been given. Okay. However, the cells of the nervous tissue, they are highly specialized for being stimulated. अब हमारे जो nervous tissue के cells हैं वो बहुत ज़्यादा specialized है. They are highly specialized because they can stimulate themselves, and after stimulating they can transmit the stimulus very rapidly from one place to another within the body. ठीक है. नर्वस टिश्यू के सेल्स इतने स्पेशलाइज्ड क्यों हैं? बिकॉज उनका जो स्टिम्युलस है, they can transmit the stimulus very rapidly from one place of the body to another. Okay, so the brain, spinal cord and nerves, they are all composed of the nervous tissue. Now nervous tissue is an important you can say important part which you should know about. Okay, so this is the diagram of the neuron which has been given. In center we have a nucleus, this is the dendrites which are present, and this is called as the cell body. Yeah, this is the axon and nerve endings which are present. So whenever you are writing an answer on nervous tissue, drawing this diagram of neuron is very much important. And why this neuron cells or neuron tissues are highly specialized? Because एक तो वो कोई भी action को stimulate करेंगे, after stimulating that action they are even going to transmit that stimulus very rapidly from one place to another within the body. Okay, तो हमारे nervous tissue में क्या क्या आता है? We have the brain, spinal cord and nerves. This all the three, they are composed of nervous tissue. Okay, brain, spinal cord and nerves, they are all composed of the nervous tissue. And the cells of this nervous tissue, we call them as nerve cells or neurons. तो nervous tissue के cells को क्या बोलते हैं हम? Nerve cells, or we call them as neurons. Okay, so a neuron consists of a cell body. Can you see, this is the structure of neuron? The neuron consists of a cell body which is having a nucleus in the center and a cytoplasm. From this cytoplasm you will see that a long thin hair-like part arises from it, and those long thin hair-like part is called as dendrites. क्या बोलते हैं हम इसे? Dendrites बोलेंगे. Okay, so usually each neuron, it has a single long part or a long process. We call it as axon. तो हर एक न्यूरॉन के पास क्या होता है? It has a long part, a single long part जिसको हम axon बोलते हैं, and it has many short branched part which we call it as dendrites. तो remember this, न्यूरॉन के पास जो long part है, the long large part, we call it as axon, and the short branched part we call it as dendrite. So you should be aware of कि axon and dendrites कहाँ पे हैं? They are present in the neurons. Okay, so this is the nerve ending, this is the nucleus which is present, and this is the cell body. Okay, so now see, an individual nerve cell, it may be up to a meter long. कोई भी एक इंडिविजुअल नर्व सेल कितना होता है? इट इज़ अ मीटर लॉन्ग, एंड मेनी नर्व फाइबर्स, जितने भी नर्व फाइबर्स है, दे आर गोइंग टू बाउंड टुगेदर, and this bounding together, it occurs by this connective tissue which makes up a nerve. So connective tissue क्या बनाएगा? This nerve fibers, they are going to bound together because of the connective tissue, and they are going to make up a nerve. Okay, so the signal that passes along the nerve fiber, we call that signal as the nerve impulse. ठीक है? What did I said? The signal that passes along the nerve fiber, we call that as a nerve impulse, and this nerve impulse, it allows us to move our muscles. Nerve impulse हमें क्या allow करता है? To move our muscles when we want to. जब भी हमें हमारे muscles को move करना है, who is helping us with that? Our nerve impulse is helping us with moving our muscles whenever we want to, right? So the functional combination of the nerve and the muscle tissue, तो nerve और muscle tissue का जो हमारा functional combination है, that is fundamental to most animal. Okay, what did I just said? The functional combination of the nerve as well as the muscle tissue, that is the most important fundamental to most of the animals. Okay, so this combination, it enables the animals to move rapidly in response to stimuli. तो ये जो combination है, it enables the animal so that it can move rapidly, or they can show their response rapidly, whatever, like they can respond rapidly to whatever stimuli has been given to them. And that is that occurs because of this combination itself, that is the combination of the nerve and the muscle tissue. Okay, so here we complete with the animal tissue as well. Now what we have learned in this lesson, first of all we have studied the definition of the tissue. Tissue is what? It is a group of cells which are similar in structure and function. What is tissue? Group of cells similar in structure and function. Okay, and plant tissues जो है, they are of two main type. First we have is meristematic tissue, and secondly we have permanent tissue. Now meristematic tissue जो है, those are the dividing tissues which are present in the growing region of the plant. So we have three different types of meristematic tissue. We have apical meristematic tissue, we have intercalary meristematic tissue, and lastly we have is lateral meristematic tissue. Okay, now this permanent tissue, the second type of tissue, that plant tissue that we have is permanent tissue. Now permanent tissue is derived from the meristematic tissue only. Once, you can say, once the meristematic tissue it loses its ability to divide, we get this permanent tissue which has been formed. So we can classify this permanent tissue as simple tissue, simple permanent tissue, and complex permanent tissue, right? And the examples of simple permanent tissue is what? Parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. These are the three types of simple tissue that we have. And xylem and phloem, these are the types of complex tissue we have. So this is what we have discussed on the plant tissue. After that we started with the animal tissue, where we saw that animal tissues are of four main type. We have epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. These are the four different types of animal tissue that we have. So depending on the shape and the function, epithelial tissue ko we can classify it as squamous epithelial tissue, cuboidal epithelial tissue, columnar epithelial tissue, ciliated epithelial tissue, and glandular epithelial tissue. So depending upon the shape and function, we have this 5 different types of epithelial tissues which have been present. After that, the different types of connective tissue that we have in our body, it includes areolar tissue, adipose tissue, bone, tendon, ligament, cartilage, and blood. So these are the different types of the connective tissue that we are having. Okay, after that we have 3 different types of muscle tissues that we have discussed. So we have striated muscle tissue, unstriated muscle tissue, and cardiac muscle tissue. Okay, so these are the 3 different types of muscle tissue that we have discussed. And lastly we have discussed on the nervous tissue, where we saw that this nervous tissue is made up of neurons. किससे बना है nervous tissue? Neurons से. And these neurons, they receive and they conduct impulses. What does it do? It receives as well as it conducts the impulses which are necessary for us. Okay, so now we have certain questions to discuss on. First of all, the first question is, define the term tissue. Now what exactly a tissue is, or how are you going to define this tissue as? So I'm writing it. It is a bit difficult. The simpler one is also given in your textbook. The first definition that we have discussed on, you can go with that as well. Okay, so you can write a tissue is a cluster of cells which are similar in structure and they work together. Now they are similar in structure and they work together to perform a particular function. Okay, so this is what you're going to define tissue as. After that, the second question that we have is, how many types of elements together they make the xylem tissue? What do you think? How many types of tissues they make up the xylem tissue? So I'll write xylem tissue is made up of four main elements. कितने? Four main elements. Mainly we have vessels, then we have tracheids, after that we have xylem fibers, xylem fibers के बाद we have xylem parenchyma. Okay, so these are the different elements which make up our xylem tissue. Now the third question is, how are simple tissue different from the complex tissue? So I'll write differentiating like table. So simple tissue, and here we have complex tissue. Okay, so simple tissue में you are going to write that simple tissue, they are made up of single type of cell that perform only one common function. ओके, सो सिंपल टिश्यू जो है वो एक ही टाइप के सेल से बनता है एंड दे परफॉर्म ओनली वन कॉमन फंक्शन. ओके, आफ्टर दैट जो हमारा कॉम्प्लेक्स टिश्यू है, दिस कॉम्प्लेक्स टिश्यू दे आर मेड अप ऑफ more than one kind of cell that coordinate to perform one particular function. ओके, तो सिंपल टिश्यू जो है वो एक टाइप के सेल से बनते हैं, whereas कॉम्प्लेक्स टिश्यू जो है they are made up of more than one kind of cells and they are going to coordinate together so that they can perform a particular function. Okay, now the next question given is, what is the difference between the parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma on the basis of their cell wall? Okay, so I'll just show you that. See, I want you all to make a tabular form like differentiating table, like where you're going to write about parenchyma, then we have collenchyma, and lastly we have this sclerenchyma. Okay, तो parenchyma का जो cell wall है that is thin, so you'll write the cell wall are thin. Okay, collenchyma को जो cell wall है they are irregularly thickened, so you'll write cell wall is irregularly thickened. Okay, and then we have this sclerenchyma जहाँ पे the cell walls are thick. So parenchyma का cell wall is thin Collenchyma का cell wall is irregularly thickened and sclerenchyma का cell wall is thick. Okay. After that you will write that cell walls are made up of cellulose. Parenchyma का cell wall जो है, it is made up of cellulose. Okay. Collenchyma का cell wall is made up of pectin and hemicellulose. So I'll write the cell wall is made up of pectin and hemicellulose. Okay. After that sclerenchyma का cell wall जो है, they have deposition of lignin. ओके. पैरेनकाइमा का सेल वॉल किससे बनता है? सेल्यूलोज से बनता है. कॉलनकाइमा का सेल वॉल किससे बनता है? पेक्टिन एंड हेमीसेल्यूलोज से बनता है. एंड स्क्लेरेनकाइमा का सेल वॉल जो है, दैट इज फॉर्म्ड बिकॉज ऑफ द डिपोजिशन ऑफ द लिग्निन, and that is the only reason you will see that the husk of the cotton, that is the outer part of the cotton, is very much hard because it has sclerenchymatous tissue which is present there. Okay. Based upon these cell wall, so we talked about it. So you can write these 2 points. You can differentiate between parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma on the basis of the cell wall. Now the fifth question that we have is, what are the functions of the stomata? So first of all you can write that the stomata are tiny pores. Wait. Stomata are tiny pores present on the outer layer of the cell. ठीक है. तो स्टोमाटा क्या है? स्टोमाटा जो है, दोज आर टाइनी पोर्स, जो कहाँ पे प्रेजेंट होता है? आउटर लेयर ऑफ द सेल पे, दैट इज द एपिडर्मिस. वेयर इज द स्टोमाटा प्रेजेंट? ऑन द epidermis. Okay, so stomata is going to bring about the exchange of gases and transpiration. What is the function of stomata? So you'll write that stomata brings about the exchange of gases and transpiration. So this is the function of stomata. Transpiration is what? Loss of water from the tip of the plant. That is called as transpiration process. So stomata is going to bring about, like, the exchange of gases is going to occur because of the stomata, as well as transpiration process also occurs because of stomata. Okay, now diagrammatically we have to show the difference between the 3 types of muscle fibers. So we have 3 different types of muscle fibers. We have cardiac muscle. What are the 2 different types? एक तो कार्डियक मसल है, देन वी हैव स्मूथ मसल एंड लास्टली वी हैव स्ट्राइटेड मसल. ठीक है. So these are the 3 different types of muscle fibers that we have. Now if I have to draw the cardiac muscle, how I'm going to draw it? See, my drawing is not that good, so you can bear my drawing. Some or the other how I'm drawing, like I used to draw like this only in my exams. So my pen is not working. I'll just draw it like this. So you can make it like any way you can make it. Okay. But this is a technique that I used to use. अब यहाँ से I have closed that, but I'm going to make one more here. So for this, like this you have to make, and you have to show many nuclei which have been present on it. Okay, so they can be present anywhere. You have to show it like this. So this is how the cardiac muscle looks like, and you can write several points as well, that this cardiac muscle is present in heart, Okay, it is involuntary in nature. Involuntary means it doesn't work as per our wish, it is going to work according to its wish, right? And cardiac muscle, you will write that the muscle fibers are branched. Okay, so you'll write that the muscle fibers of cardiac muscle fibers are branched. After that, the second type of muscle that we have is the smooth muscle. Now smooth muscle ka diagram is somewhat easy, you just need to make it like this. Okay, you can make a better one, I know. ठीक है, एंड बीच में यू हैव टू शो अ न्यूक्लियस. ठीक है, एंड यहाँ पे आप ऐसे माइक्रोफिब्रिल्स भी शो करोगे उसके अंदर. तो बीच में आ गया न्यूक्लियस, ये हो गया, ये क्या है, दिस आर मायोफिब्रिल्स. सो स्मूथ मसल्स जो है दे आर फाउंड इन लंग्स एंड एलिमेंट्री कैनाल. ओके, दे आर फाउंड इन lungs and elementary canal. After that you will write that the smooth muscles, they are voluntary in nature. They are voluntary in nature. They possess many nuclei. After that you will write the last point as they are spindle shaped. Okay. Now the third type that we have is striated muscle. Now see how striated muscles look like. You have to show the nucleus outside. Okay. And अंदर आप ऐसे striations भी दिखाओगे. So I'll label it as striation, and this is the nucleus which is present. Okay, so see, now striated muscles, they are connected with bones. किससे connected है ये? They are connected with bones. Okay, they are voluntary in nature. Then they are long and cylindrical muscle fibers. How are they? Long and cylindrical. After that you will write that they possess many nuclei. Okay, and they are unbranched. So this is how you have to make a table, and diagrammatically you have to show the difference. So I have shown, like I have made the diagrams as well as I have written the differences which occur between all of them. Okay, now see, the next question is, what is the specific function of the cardiac muscles? So now only I told you that this cardiac muscles, they are branched and cylindrical. कैसे होते हैं कार्डियक मसल? दे आर ब्रांच्ड एंड सिलिंड्रिकल एज वेल एज दे आर uninucleated and involuntary in nature. How are they? They are uninucleated and involuntary in nature. Then we can write that throughout one's lifetime, throughout one's lifetime, cardiac muscle bring about rhythmic contraction and relaxation. Okay, तो कार्डियक मसल का काम क्या है? Rhythmic contraction and relaxation. Now we have to differentiate between the striated, unstriated and cardiac muscle on the basis of their structure and location in the body. So I want you all to write again. I want you all to make 4 columns. एक तो characteristics. Then firstly we are going to write about the striated muscles. Then unstriated muscle. And lastly we have this cardiac muscle. Okay. So characteristics में first of all we are going to write about the shape. Then we are going to write the location in the body. After that, dark and light bands. What kind of dark and light bands are present? Okay. So first I'll tell you about the striated muscle. Striated muscle का shape कैसे होता है? I hope you remember the structure that we have seen. So it is long, ठीक है? Long, cylindrical होता है ये, and non-tapering भी होता है, and they are unbranched. ठीक है? Non-tapering and they are unbranched as well. Then comes our unstriated muscles. So unstriated muscles, they are long and tapering. What are they? Long and tapering, and they are also unbranched. Then cardiac muscles जो है, this cardiac muscles, they are cylindrical and non-tapering. Cylindrical and non-tapering, and they are branched. Okay. After that, with respect to the location, if I say, so cardiac muscles जो है, we can find them in the hands, legs and skeletal muscle. कहाँ पे मिलता है हमें? Hands, legs and skeletal muscle. Then unstriated muscles, we can find them in the walls of the stomach, wall of stomach. Okay. Then in the intestine, ureter, intestine, ureter, as well as bronchi. Okay. After that जो हमारा cardiac muscle है, that is only found in the, कहाँ पे मिलता है cardiac muscle? Only the heart. So cardiac muscle is also called as the heart muscle. Okay. तो अभी dark and light bands are present in the striated muscle. So I'll write they are present. Then it is absent in unstriated muscle. Here in cardiac muscle they will be present but less prominent. Okay. So present but less prominent. Okay. Getting my point? I hope you are clear with the differentiation between the striated muscle, unstriated muscle and the cardiac muscle. Now you have to draw the diagram of the neuron. So I hope you remember. Now I am drawing it here, but as I told you that bear my drawing for now. So this is how it occurs. It has a nucleus in the center, and here we get dendrites out of it, right? So these are the dendrites which are present. So from here, from the center we have like, see ये ऐसे करके यहाँ से निकलता है बाहर. Okay, so here you will have axons like this. Now dendrites जैसे मैंने draw किया ना, don't draw it like that way, otherwise you'll lose your marks, huh? And this is how it goes on, where you have to show some dots. Okay, ऐसे करके आपको शो करना है. So these are the nerve endings that we have. क्या बोलते हैं इसको हम? Nerve endings. इसके अंदर you have to make like this. So these are the squamous cell. Okay, these are dendrites. Okay, this inside we have the nucleus. This is the myelin sheet. This is the axon. Okay, so this is how you have to know all the things. This is the structure of the neuron that we have. Now you have to name the following thing. The tissue that forms the inner line of the mouth. What do you think? What type of tissue it is? So inner lining of the mouth has been formed by the epithelial tissue and squamous epithelium. ठीक है? So I hope you remember this when we have discussed. After that, the tissue that connects the muscle to the bone in humans. So the tissue that is connecting the muscle to the bone is called as tendons. Okay. Then the tissue that transports food in plant is what? Food transport करने वाला is phloem and water transport करने वाला is xylem, right? Tissue that stores the fat in our body, that is the adipose tissue. Then connective tissue with a fluid matrix. So it is blood, because we know that blood is a connective tissue which is a fluid matrix, right? And the tissue which is present in the brain is the nervous tissue. I hope you all knew the answer for all of these things, because हमने पहले भी ये discuss किया हुआ है, right? Now we need to identify the type of tissue which is present in the skin. So skin के अंदर कौन सा tissue present है? We have striated squamous epithelial tissue. ठीक है, striated squamous epithelial, okay, epithelial tissue. Then the second type, you need to find out the tissue which is present in the bark of the tree. So I'll write bark के अंदर we have protective tissue and cork. Okay. Then in the bone, which kind of tissue do we have in the bone? We have connective tissue, right? I hope you remember. Bone, blood and all, connective tissue. After that, the fourth thing that we have is the lining of the kidney tubule. So lining of kidney tubule mein we have which kind of tissue? We have cuboidal epithelial tissue. क्या है? We have cuboidal epithelial tissue. And lastly, vascular bundle में we have complex permanent tissue, that is xylem and phloem. क्या है हमारे पास? Complex permanent tissue, and this complex permanent tissue, it includes xylem and phloem. Okay. So I hope you are clear with this different types of tissue which are present in the different things. Now we need to name the region in which parenchyma tissue is present. So I'll write the parenchyma tissue is present in the pith of the stem and the root. Okay, कहाँ पे present है ये? In the piths of the stems and the roots. And when parenchyma tissue, it contains chlorophyll What do we call it as? It is called chlorenchyma. And where can we find this? It is found in green leaves. Okay. And secondly, if this parenchyma is found in aquatic plant and it has large air cavities, then and it enables then we call it as, what do we call it as? We have discussed this, right? It is called as parenchyma. Okay, so I hope you're clear with this. Now the next is, what is the role of epidermis in plant? So epidermis जो है, I'll write epidermis in plant. Epidermis, it forms an uninterrupted, क्या फॉर्म करता है? Uninterrupted and continuous layer that has no intracellular spaces. And epidermis, it provides protection to the plant as well. Okay, so it provides protection as well. Okay, now the next thing is, how does the cork it act as a protective tissue? What do you think? Cork कैसे act करता है as a protective tissue? Now we know that cork cells are dead, right? So we'll write cork cells are dead, and the arrangement of cell is so dense that there is no intracellular space. ठीक है? So deposition, now if you remember of suberin, so deposition of suberin is observed on the walls of the cell that make them impervious to water and gases. Okay, after that, this is how the cork is acting as a protective tissue. After that, we need to complete this chart. So we know that the permanent tissues are of two types, simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. Now simple के अंदर the first type that we have is parenchyma, then we have collenchyma, and lastly we have I guess the spelling went wrong, sclerenchyma. Okay, and complex permanent tissues of two type, we have xylem and phloem, which comes under this complex permanent tissue. So this is where we are completing with this lesson, exactly like we have completed with this tissue part, and I hope you are clear with whatever we have discussed till now in this lesson tissue. Okay, so now I want every one of you to know that we have two different types of tissues which are present. Those are, what are they? We have plant tissue and animal tissue. Plant tissue दो टाइप के होते हैं, कौन से होते हैं? We have meristematic tissue and we have permanent tissue. Meristematic tissue is again having three parts: apical meristematic tissue, then intercalary meristematic tissue, and lastly we have lateral meristematic tissue. And then जो दूसरा part है, that is permanent tissues of two type. We have complex simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. And animal tissues we have a four type, that is epithelial tissue, then we have connective tissue, muscular tissue, and nervous tissue. These are the four different types of animal tissue that we have. I hope it is clear till here. And now we complete here with this lesson tissues. In the next part, we are going to start with the next lesson. Thank you, everyone.